for open streets and open restaurant programs. We have been working with small businesses in the area, and the feedback that we have so far is that the program is working. It's helping them boost their revenue and to keep them afloat during this difficult time. So here we have today the various representatives from the DOT, Department of Transportation of the City of New York, that will be answering your questions and concerns about the program. But before we get to the Q&A, they're going to be presenting you some of the guidelines that the city have created to make sure that the program works smoothly throughout the city. So with that said, just wanted to remind people, I'm sorry, if you have any questions and you are watching us through Instagram or Facebook, please submit your questions. We will be more than delighted to read it for our guests. So with that said, I'll introduce you to Andrew Ronan. He's going to be talking both about the Open Street program as well as the open restaurants. Andrew is the Assistant Director of Community Partners for the New York City Department of Transportation, and also a Queens resident. So we are delighted to have someone that knows our community. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Leslie, and more specifically a Jackson Heights resident. So happy to be here, really pleased that we can talk today. So also want to point out I'm joined by my colleagues, Greta Suarez and Andrew Arcese from our Queensborough Commissioner's Office, who will be on hand also to help answer questions. So we'll dive right in. If I can share my screen. Yes, I can. There we go. So yeah, in response to the COVID pandemic, Department of Transportation was tasked with coming up with a program to help restaurants survive and begin to recover as we hopefully get out of this pandemic. So we created the Open Restaurants program, and then we added to that with an Open Streets Restaurants program. I'm going to talk through the details of how both the programs work, and then leave plenty of time for questions, and hopefully we'll see everybody on here taking advantage of these great opportunities once I figure out how to advance my screen. So yeah, as I mentioned, the Open Restaurants program was created to help restaurants recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. Any food service establishment that was authorized to open under phase 2 of New York's recovery can apply to be an open restaurant, which would allow those restaurants to have seating on the sidewalk immediately adjacent to their storefront, and in the curb lane also right in front of their storefront. This graphic is our dashboard that shows all the different applications throughout the city. It's a little out of date. On this one, there were 7,000 restaurants. We're now much closer to 9,000 restaurants having applied and that are operating as open restaurants throughout the city. The blue dots there, you can see where things kind of shape out. Few basic criteria when it comes to operating as an open restaurant. The sidewalk seating area must be right up against your store frontage or within about 3 feet. Has to be really close to the store frontage. The sidewalk outside must maintain an 8-foot clear path for pedestrians to pass by. And you must be 3 feet away from adjacent businesses. That's to allow for social distancing space as well, to not crowd the sidewalk and allow people to be able to walk around safely. You cannot block a subway grate, utility hardware, or a Siamese water connection. You can't block a bus stop waiting area. And tables and chairs are provided by the restaurants themselves. The city doesn't provide furniture. Tables, chairs, and their management thereof is all the responsibility of the participating restaurants. As I mentioned, restaurants are also able to take up the curb lane in front of their storefront, in front of their frontage, and place seating out there. It's a bit heavier lift to have curb lane seating, largely because we want to make sure that everyone out there is safe, particularly with moving vehicles in an adjacent lane. So restaurants are required to create a protective barrier that covers all 3 sides continuously. So there can't be any gaps in the barrier. We have a diagram in a little bit that I can point out. And the barriers have to be a minimum of 18 inches wide for protection purposes and 30 to 36 inches in height. That's before you even put in any plantings. So we need a certain level of height and a certain width that's very specific, 18 inches wide, 30 to 36 high. The barriers must be directly next to each other. They can't be gaps, so it can't be barrier space. And you cannot go any further out than 8 feet from the curb, and that's inclusive of that 18 inches. So from curb to the outside of the barrier, can be no more than 8 feet. Roadway seating can't exceed the length of the business frontage. So all of the open restaurants requirements are restricted to the frontage of the business. I know that there are some businesses that ask about setting up, oh, can I put tables and chairs? My neighbor's storefront, he's okay with it. He's giving me permission. Even if you have landlord permission, you are not allowed to exceed the width of your existing storefront. Anything that goes in the street in terms of the barriers has to have a high visibility, sort of yellow retroreflective tape on it, or reflectors of some sort so motorists can see it as they come, just to ensure the safety of those who will be dining in the roadway. And everything must be ADA compliant. So anything that anyone needs to get into, there must be a ramp there, and people with disabilities must be able to access it. There are a few siting requirements. The roadway seating setup can't be within 15 feet of a fire hydrant, 8 feet of a crosswalk, or in a no stopping anytime or no standing anytime zone. Slight variation on the no standing deal is if it's no standing from 3 to 7, let's say, you can set up outside of those hours, but you can't be set up during the time that no standing is in effect. Can't set up in a bike lane or a bus lane, or a bus stop, a taxi stand, or a car share space. You can use umbrellas and tents. The umbrellas must have the weighted base, and tents must follow the manufacturer's installation instructions to secure them so they don't blow away. Like, for example, in yesterday's tropical storm, we asked everyone to take in their tents and umbrellas because there's a danger of them flying away. If they're going to be out on the roadway and on the sidewalk, they must be weighted. They cannot be drilled into the sidewalk or to the roadway. You can't install them in, so you have to weight them down with sandbags or other things that are provided by the manufacturer. And again, just like with the sidewalk seating, the tables and chairs and all the barriers and everything is provided by the individual restaurants that are participating. Here's just a quick diagram that kind of reviews how the setup works. You can see against the business frontage here, if you can see my cursor, the tables and chairs in that little blue hash zone there are right up against the store frontage. They're evenly spaced at 6 feet apart to allow for social distancing issues. And then there's 8 feet of clear path from where the seating is all the way to the curb line to allow pedestrians to get through safely without interrupting diners and give everybody enough space to get around. If you go around the corner here, there's a bus stop where no seating can be placed. So if there's a bus stop in front of your establishment, you're not able to put seating out in that bus stop area. There's no seating on the sidewalk adjacent to the curb. So you see lots of restaurants that put some extra tables right against the curb. Currently, that is not permitted. But you are permitted, if you self-certify and meet the siting requirements, to set up in the curb lane. So here you have the curb lane set up with the barriers going all the way around 3 sides. They're completely continuous. There are no gaps in the barriers, so nothing can get through, no one can get out. The barriers, again, are 18 inches in width and 30 to 36 inches high. They can be planters, they can be other things. It's very kind of broad in what you want to come up with, but you do have to have the 18 inches width and the 36 inches in height. Umbrellas, again, are permitted, but they must have a base and be weighted down. Tents also, pop-up tents are permitted, but you must follow the manufacturer's instructions in terms of keeping them weighted down and secure. And again, the 15 feet from the fire hydrant up there on the left side of the screen, keeping things clear, 8 feet from the crosswalk, also to allow space so people aren't walking right up against people who are dining, to allow that social distancing space. So this is the basic setup, and we can certainly share this presentation. This is all also located on our website, nyc.gov/open-restaurants. This diagram and everything I'm about to tell you today is all up there. This is sort of an example of a compliant setup. In this case, they used Yodoc barriers. They didn't build out planters or anything, but they achieved the height with the barriers. They achieved the thickness. There's no gaps. The umbrellas that are there are weighted, and it's directly in front of Red Hook Lobster Pound's frontage. So they have all 3 sides. It's a little hard to see in this photo, but they have all 3 sides, plus the edges on the street with the seating set up appropriately. Some examples of non-compliant seating. As you can see in the top image, there's no barricades protecting those tables and chairs from oncoming vehicles. I think the suggestion here is that's a little bench in the middle. It's supposed to be a barricade, but it is not compliant. It's not continuous. It does not provide any sort of protection. And it doesn't meet the 18-inch minimum width. And in both situations here, the case is the same. Even the buckets with the ropes and stuff like that, not thick enough. There's no reflective element. It's not a safe setup. So you got to think that you want your diners to feel safe and to be safe from vehicles as they move. So in either case, these setups would not be compliant. As I mentioned, open restaurants information is up at nyc.gov/open restaurants. The system is rather straightforward when it comes to how to apply. It is a self-certification system. So you'll be able to go to nyc.gov/open restaurants, and you'll be presented with a questionnaire when it comes to time to apply, where you are basically self-certifying. You are saying that you meet all the criteria that I just laid out, that you are providing barriers like I just laid out, that you are an operating food service establishment with a Department of Health license, and putting all that in. If you have a state liquor authority license and serve alcohol, you are permitted to serve alcohol outside. You'll have to register that as well when you go to apply for open restaurants. And again, largely because of state liquor regulations, the serving area is really restricted to your existing storefront. You can go out into the curb, but you can't go down the block, you can't go side to side, but you are able to serve alcohol to the tables set up there. So I'll keep going. I think one of the evolutions of the open restaurants program is what we call open streets restaurants. What it allows for is on a street with 3 or more restaurants, the restaurants or a bid or a community-based partner can apply to close that block to traffic on Friday evenings, Saturdays, and Sundays. Friday between the hours of 5 and 11, Saturdays and Sundays from noon to 11. In the context of the closure, restaurants that have certified to set up and serve in the curb lane can extend beyond that 8-foot limit into the street, still maintaining their storefront width, but they can go further into the street, provided the street has a 15-foot emergency lane at some point, allowing for emergency vehicles to get all the way through. So you can go all the way up to the 15-foot lane. In some cases, depending on the width of the street, you can gain up to 7 or 8 more feet, which allows for more tables and seating during the hours, the Friday, Saturday, Sunday hours that we posted. This slide's a little outdated as well. There were 47 corridors participating up until recently. Now there's 60 different corridors participating. I'm not sure everybody is, but one of the closest locations to us would be Woodside Avenue between 76th and 78th Street. So if you're around in the area and want to see what they're doing for Open Streets Restaurants, I would encourage you to check that out. This is just an example. This is Dumbo in Brooklyn. This is how the Dumbo bid facilitates outdoor dining in the context of a street closure for the restaurants there. In this context, if you're a group of restaurants that wants to apply for this, or you're a bid or community-based organization, the bid and the rest, or the group of restaurants, is responsible for the overall setup of the street. They're responsible for putting out the barricades to close the street from traffic and making sure that the restaurants that are participating have self-certified and are participating to the extent that the closure allows and not going beyond that. They must have someone readily available to move those barricades in case of emergency. And then overall, just make sure the whole site is safe, clean, and operating the way it's intended to. I jumped my own slides, but the partner role in the Open Streets Restaurants program is coordination with local food service establishments, getting their participation, getting the community on board, notifying them of the street closure, managing the barricades, setup and breakdown of public seating if we have that, and then cleaning and trash removal from the location. The individual restaurants in the context of a street closure are responsible for their own individual setups, and the partner takes care of the overall closure. Similar, again, for participating in Open Streets Restaurants and open restaurants, you have to be a food service establishment licensed by the Department of Health. And you're gonna have to, if you wanna participate in Open Streets Restaurants, you'll need to re-self-certify, even though you already self-certified, because you're extending your seating area for the duration of the closure. So you go back to the certification system, it's a 2-minute process, put in the square footage of the new area that you'll be serving to, and re-self-certify so you can participate in the context of a street closure. All applicants at all times are required to provide the tables and chairs. Restaurants provide their own individual tables and chairs. If there's a public seating component, we'll discuss that individually, but that will also be provided by the organizing partner and managed carefully. There's still some guidelines around sanitization, and keeping them safe and clean. So we take the public seating piece sort of on a case by case. And in both programs, both in open restaurants and open streets restaurants, businesses that only sell alcohol and not food are not eligible for this program. I actually think the rules have changed that if you are a bar, you must sell food and you must serve food to anyone who's taking part in the outdoor dining piece. So food is a requirement for participation in either one of these two programs. This is just a diagram of the typical street closure event in the context of open streets restaurants. You see the blue strips on the outside there are potential restaurant seating areas if there's restaurants that have business frontage in that area. The 8-foot path on the sidewalk must be maintained. In this diagram, there's a 15-foot lane down the middle that provides additional square feet of space on either side to allow restaurants to set up in. More opportunities for participating there. Barricades get placed on the outside of the crosswalk. And again, those are maintained and managed by the community partner. Or again, if there's a group of like 3 or more restaurants that want to nominate one restaurant to organize everything, that restaurant would then be responsible for the overall setup. Just a different view of a similar diagram, just sort of bird's eye view, looking at the different seating areas. A lot of the setting requirements remain the same. There must be 15 feet clear on either side of a fire hydrant, 15-foot emergency lane for vehicles to get through, 8 feet from crosswalks, and obviously the seating within the areas must be compliant with social distance guidelines. When it comes to open streets restaurants, this is, pardon me, basically the workflow. A community partner will submit an application, we'll review and vet and talk through with NYPD, FDNY, et cetera. There is a letter agreement. It does not come with an insurance requirement, but it does ask the community partner to take on certain responsibilities, specifically as it relates to maintaining an emergency lane and moving barricades. And then once approved, open streets restaurants can occur Friday evenings from 5 to 11, Saturdays and Sundays from noon to 11. Just because you apply doesn't mean you have to operate on all those days. There are certain locations that are doing just Sundays. There are some that are doing Saturdays and Sundays. There's a lot of flexibility in there. So it really depends on what the best benefit for your local businesses are and what works. There's flexibility within the program, provided everyone meets the self-certification requirements and provided the community partner meets the management requirements. Like I said, up on our website, there's a comprehensive list of a lot more details at nyc.gov/open restaurants, and that's where you will go to apply both to be an open restaurant and if you want to host an open streets restaurant. Both options will be there. It'll be very obvious. And just some examples, I think this is Mulberry Street down in Little Italy. This is during their open streets restaurants event. In some instances, restaurants don't necessarily exceed their 8 feet, but just providing extra open space for people to walk through creates a better draw and gets more people into dining at various establishments. So it makes the street safer and easier for people to walk around in the context of dining setups. You have my information here. Kyle also works with me on this program. But as I mentioned before, Greta and Andrew from the Borough Commissioner's Office are here. Feel free to reach out to them as well for any information or questions.
Thank you, Andrew. We have a question, and of course, we're going to start with questions about enforcement. And the question is, can you share information on how enforcement is handled?
Enforcement is done with a variety of city agencies, from the Mayor's Office of Media Entertainment, their nightlife sector, folks from DOT's Highway Quality Assurance Unit, Department of Health, State Liquor Authority. There's a lot of people involved in enforcing. When it comes to open restaurants, inspectors are going out quite frequently and making sure that the setups are compliant to the guidelines that I just mentioned, that the roadway seating in particular is very safe and meets the 18-inch, the 36-inch height, the continuous barricades. My understanding of the way inspections work is generally what will happen is an inspection will happen if something's found not to be compliant. The restaurant will be given 24 hours to kind of right the situation, make it right, and then will be allowed to continue operating. I think that then escalates in other ways if there's frequent violations of the same issue, up to and including us taking away the ability for the restaurant to have seating on the sidewalk or the street. So restaurants, inspections are frequent, and a lot is about safety in the roadway. So making sure you're compliant with that is sort of top priority.
Thank you so much. We have several questions here. We have, if you do not have a wide enough sidewalk, I presume that that precludes you from putting out seating on the sidewalk adjacent to store.
Yeah, so if you can't provide 8 feet in addition to the seating outside of your store, it would probably preclude you from having sidewalk seating, but may not preclude you from having curb lane seating. So you could move into the parking spot in front of your business and set up your seating there.
Okay. Okay. We have another enforcement questions. Are there fines associated with non-compliance?
There is, I believe there are fines eventually. The way the enforcement's set up is we're not starting out fining. We really want compliance. But at a point, it's possible that there could be fines if there's repeated violations.
Okay. So we're moving on here. Is the community board involved in approvals of street closure?
No, in the context of open streets, restaurants, street closures, we ask partners to notify the community board and notify the precinct, but approval is not required from the community board. It's all kind of handled on the DOT end of things in coordination with NYPD and FDNY.
Okay. We here have another question, and this is a very common in our community, that many storefronts are quite narrow in our community. I'm assuming somewhere in Queens this happens across the board, meaning very few tables are allowed and businesses won't be able to make enough profit to stay viable. Is the city looking at instituting a way to enable a restaurant to get agreement from adjacent property owner to expand seating? I believe San Francisco has done this. Which is,
I can say that.
I'm sorry, this is something that I have been asked. Can people lease for whatever amount a vacant space next to their property and extend if they have a lease to that property?
If they have a lease for the property, then yes, they can extend to the property for which they have a lease. I imagine they would need to do whatever they need to do with state liquor authority to get their liquor license to expand to that as well. But if you have a lease for the space, absolutely. You don't even need to necessarily be occupying the space internally. As long as you have a lease, you can operate outside of it. I don't know where we are on the conversation about allowing businesses to expand with permission of adjacent ownership, but I do know, I can say that that's a conversation that is being had, that's something being considered for the program, understanding that there are just some locations where storefront width is very narrow, but right now, even with permission, you can't expand beyond the confines of the storefront.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think that if I could be of any assistance, because that's a problem that we have on 82nd Street, that many of our businesses, especially bakeries, they're very narrow, that in some instances they can only put a table with 2 chairs outside. So that would be a great help. And I think in a community where there's high vacancy for very small businesses. Moving on here. So how do 3 pits affect the 8 feet distance requirement? How can you work around the 3 pits if they create a non-compliant situation for a few feet of storefront?
Tree pits are permissible. You would count that as part of the 8 feet. So the tree pit isn't necessarily an obstruction for the 8 feet. Mm-hmm. So you can work around tree pits pretty easily.
Okay. Is the 18 feet, 18 feet barriers not required on street closures?
18-inch barriers. So in the street closure, if a restaurant has their outdoor seating set up in the curb lane already, they can go beyond that seating, but they don't need to provide extra barriers because we've closed the street to traffic. So they can put additional tables and chairs on the outside. They should delineate the space somehow, and that can be done with rope and stanchions for the duration of the closure. But since there's no vehicles moving, any additional seating during the street closure does not need the 18-inch barricade.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that is sort of questions. One question that I have is, for example, in our community, we have long-term established street vendors. And let's say that they are adjacent or in front of our, I mean, in front of our restaurant. How is that to be managed? How can a restaurant still put chairs and table if the 8 feet distance would be impossible, given that we have street vending as well?
Street vending. That's probably a situation best resolved on a case-by-case basis, but in general, in this instance, we're giving the restaurants permission to use the space in front of their storefront. So in theory, they should be able to claim it for the duration of this program. But I think, as we know, the street vending issue gets very complicated very fast. So probably best to kind of deal with on a case-by-case.
Okay. That's the questions here on my end. I'm not sure if the chamber has a question. I actually have another clarification. In terms of parking on open streets, is it allowed for residents to continue, or do they have to be no parking in order to have open streets?
In open restaurants, we provide the restaurant with no parking signage so they can preserve the spot in front of their space. We do the same in open streets restaurants as well. We provide the community partner with no parking signs to encourage folks to not park clearly and allow for greater pedestrian space. The reality is what we can't do is provide towing services. DOT doesn't do that, and NYPD doesn't have the resources to tow on that scale. So what has happened in some locations is cars wind up remaining, but we encourage them not to. So technically during an open streets restaurants event, parking is not permitted, but the challenge comes in actually getting motorists to comply with that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. For those that are joining us via Instagram and Facebook, this is your opportunity to ask questions for the Department of Transportation regarding the open street and opened restaurants program. And so we have another question, and we are going back to enforcement. How will enforcement officers know if you have a lease for the store next door?
That's a great question. I would suggest having it on hand to produce, or some sort of document that says from the landlord or whoever that you are a leaseholder there. In every situation in the first pass of inspections, generally, even if you're cited or it fails for whatever reason, you have that 24-hour compliance period where you can send a picture of your lease or of the corrected situation to the open restaurants at dot.nyc.gov, and it gets checked and you get approval to move on. But I would keep some sort of documentation on hand just in case.
Is there coordination between the city and the state regarding inspections, or can any agency or state, they just show up, let's say, within the same day at different times?
It's my understanding that a few restaurants have gotten multiple inspections on the same day. I know there's a lot of coordination to reduce that because it is kind of wasteful, really. What I will say is that State Liquor Authority, I believe, does their own inspections based on state liquor laws. So they might be doing, they might overlap with open restaurants compliance questions and issues. So there might still be that effort, but I do know that there's a lot of conversation on the back end to make our inspection efforts more efficient and not double inspect or triple inspect in some cases.
Okay, thank you. Can you share, like, what is the feedback that you have received so far from businesses about the program?
You know, we've received a lot of really positive feedback, and you know, to be clear, this is the best we can possibly do. Every situation is very different, so not every restaurant's going to be able to take advantage, unfortunately. But the businesses that can and do have been grateful for it and working pretty well. There's a lot of feedback, as you might imagine, on enforcement issues, but generally, particularly our open streets restaurants program, you know, we jumped from 47 to almost 60, which just shows the popularity of that, and a lot of the businesses there that are really enjoying the benefits of a street closure as well.
Okay. So Andrew, one of the things that I have heard from some of the businesses in our community is they are interested in the program. They know that this can make a difference. But there, you know, we had an incident in Roosevelt Avenue. And so people kind of fear that this might be widespread. But when I'm looking at the incident and compared to other incidents that had happened, in which we even have, you know, the cards going into storefronts, it doesn't seem that this is an abnormality or is beyond the typical year accidents that happened in the city. And I believe there was no casualties in any of the incidents that have happened so far, correct?
Yeah, and of what I know, I don't think there's been that many incidents either. You know, Roosevelt Avenue had one early on, and there was one down in Brooklyn not too long ago. I don't have the data on any other sort of serious incidents. And so by and large, it seems like people understand what these things set up on the roadway are and how to drive around them. We did launch an education campaign for motorists and every New Yorker about the right way to deal and work with restaurants in the street, and it looks like for now that's been effective. So
so someone asked, when is the program ending?
The open restaurants program right now is slated to go to the end of the year. Open streets restaurants is slated to go to the end of October, I think. I imagine the possibility of open restaurants extending in some way, shape, or form is certainly being discussed and on the table. And the mayor did announce the other day that open restaurants will definitely come back next summer. So even if there's a winter break, we'll likely see the open restaurants program come back in the warmer weather.
So one of the things that has come up, at least in my community, is the concern about restaurants not being good neighbors. And one concern is sort of music. Are there detailed rules about the music, or are they the same as the pre-program, that basically no loud music, that it had to stay within your establishment? Can you elaborate, like, what are the rules when it comes to playing music? Can people put speaker outside in the seating area for the patrons?
Currently, no. There's going to be more specific guidance coming out shortly around music and how it can be implemented in these setups, because it is, you know, for some restaurants, it's an important feature that helps create a good ambiance. But currently, no. Right now, if I understand correctly, NYPD is not providing any amplified sound permits, so speakers outside wouldn't be allowed. And it's never been allowed for a business to blast music from inside onto the street. The other thing we also want to be careful of is creating an event or a draw that could create a crowd, and that kind of conflicts with social distancing rules. So I do know that some guidance on some ways to provide music, whether it's like a solo musician or piped in music, somehow are being worked on. But right now, mostly because of fears of social distancing issues, we want to stay away as much way as we can from possible from creating something that looks like an event.
Okay. And for the open, I mean, I understand that for the restaurants, they cannot have that. But for example, can the community for an open street program have some music being played out? Or can there be like events or like, let's say classes, right? Like we're seeing people are eager to exercise and they miss the gym. Can the community organize and carry out like a Zumba class?
We'd have to go case by case on that. Right now, outside of the open streets restaurants programs, it is possible for a community-based organization to apply for a permit to host events on a single block. or in a plaza. But permits for things like that right now are embargoed in locations where there's open dining, open restaurant dining, and open restaurant setups. Again, just because of the fear of creating a crowding and such like that. That guidance is likely to change, but right now it's very light touch, if at all, is sort of the guidance.
Okay. So we have another question. This is a topic that we covered earlier. So it's once again, we're going back to the question about using the next door vacant spaces. Is there, like, let's say that the person has a lease to utilize the space next door, other than that, you mentioned that they can do that, they can use that if they have the authority, but if they have a liquor license, they need to get permission for the liquor license to sell or to serve drinks in the adjacent property.
Yeah, that's my understanding, because I think liquor licenses are very specific to the physical footprint of the business, so they would need to extend their license to cover the additional lease space. Okay.
So quick question, I guess a clarification. So when the restaurant is set up open street, open restaurant, and they're serving on the street, do they have to get their license modified by the liquor license or by the Department of Health?
Nope, the self-certification process is the tool that we use to communicate to state liquor authority that they're extending their premises. So it's all kind of centralized there, so they don't need to go to SLA and they don't need to go to health to extend or change anything.
Okay. All right, so that's really great questions that we are getting, in that they are, and thank you so much, Andrew. Sorry, I just want to remind those that are following us through Instagram, on Facebook Live, that all your questions are welcome, and we will make sure that Andrew gets them.
Thank you, Leslie. And I also have some questions that I received by Facebook Live. One question is, when will open restaurants begin next year?
I don't know that we have a specific date set, but the contemplation is with warm weather. So we should look for either late spring or very early summer start, but I think that's all still being worked out.
I have more questions. Can I ask all the questions at the time, or I can switch with Leslie? You have some questions, Leslie?
Jacqueline, I think I have covered my questions. If I get any, I will wait for you.
Okay. They're asking which city agency is responsible for inspecting the open restaurant, for the inspections?
Inspections are carried out by a group of different agencies. So it's like an interagency group that's doing it. There are a fair amount of DOT inspectors that come out and inspect, but there's also health folks involved, there's state liquor authority folks involved, and then there's folks from the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment Nightlife Division that are also involved in inspections. So it's a multi-agency effort.
Thank you. Two more questions actually. Is a restaurant owner that wants to know if he can share some seating space with the neighbor restaurant, to the next door restaurant.
Right, that would still conflict with your service has to be specific to your storefront area. So you can't really, officially, you can't really seat your customers at someone else's seating area or vice versa. We don't necessarily have what we call a collective model for that just yet. So the short answer to that is nope, not possible. The longer answer is we may come up with an iteration that allows for shared seating, but we don't have that yet either.
I can see also more questions on the chat. I don't know if you can read it or I can ask the questions for you.
If you don't mind asking.
Yes, okay. It's a similar question to the neighborhood. It's a person who has not a white sidewalk and is asking if they can use some sidewalk adjacent to the store.
Unless it's within the storefront's width, they can't exceed it. So
Okay.
they have to stay within the storefront.
Okay, maybe you already answered this live. One more question here. Is the community board involved on approval of street closures?
No, the community board should be informed, and we ask partners to do that, but we don't need community board approval or a vote to enact the street closures.
I know that there are not many trees in the sidewalks in Queens, especially in certain neighborhoods, but it's asking if how the tree pits affect the
Sorry, Jacqueline, I read those questions. I went through.
Yeah,
okay,
I think we got
very
those
good.
already.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, thank you so much.
Okay,
Yeah,
then I'm gonna mark it answer live on the chat.
Yeah. Oh, so something that I actually miss is, had there been any like the noise complaints? This is not
I'm sure.
my, and my gut answer with, and I will leave it to the expert, is this is New York. Yeah, there will be complaints. As a bid director, I could assure you that if we do I have got complaints that we are not doing the program yet. We are in the process of submitting our application, and then if we do it, we get complaints. So I think that it is, I think my suggestion is if that anyone has an issue with any business that they're exceeding the noise regulations, if they have a relationship with that business, please mention it or come in an agreement to when the noise should end. If not, you could always submit a 311 report. I think that this will give feedback to their city on how to improve the program and ensure that the businesses are compliant.
Yep. And I should mention that in both the open restaurants and the open streets restaurants programs, the cutoff time for service is 11 p.m. and it can't go beyond that, which is part of the notion of making sure overnight that our streets are as quiet as they can be. But again, like you said, it's New York City. But one thing I do know is a lot of restaurants, because it's so popular, are having a hard time getting people to leave at 11. And so a few restaurants have adjusted their service hours. So, the last meal service is at 10, the last meal service is at 9:30, the last drink is at 10. And then hopefully if you end the service by then, people will leave by 11.
Okay, so I just want to clarify that when you guys said like service end by 11, you mean shutdown has to be done by 11. It's not
Correct.
that the last meal can be put. So by 11 o'clock,
Right.
basically technically closed door.
Gotta go.
Okay.
Yep.
So thank you. I think that is a sort of a key because it makes a difference. I think if it means 11 o'clock service closed, it's just many people will read it as serving the last
meal at 11, and then they're there till 12:30, and that's when they get in trouble. Right.
So basically they have to allocate time to shut down the tables and the chairs and make sure that the public has moved on.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks for that. Let me give me 1 second. I had to say that I've been going around the city and particularly in Jackson Heights, and I'm quite impressed with what the community has been doing. Some setups are very creative and very lovely and conform to the community. For those businesses that are listening to us today and they are located in Jackson Heights or Elmhurst, near the 82nd Street Partnership. We are on 82nd Street between 37th Avenue and Baxter Avenue. We have right now a group of volunteers, mostly architects, that are helping the businesses for this program. The assistance can be just as simple as taking measurements to make sure that you're in compliance. They already have created some barricades that DOT have, their DOT approved barricades. So you will have the models so that way that you can use it for your business. And in some instances, if funds allow, we will help the businesses build their outdoor seating. If people have any questions about the program or they're interested in participating, they can call my office. Our number is 718-335-9421, or they can send us an email at info@82ndstreet.org. That will be info@82, the number, ND Street, fully spelled out, .org. This is a wonderful program, but we have limited resources and limited time. So we are operating on a first come, first serve basis. So if you contact us, we will give you an intake form. And if we have volunteers available, we will reach out to you as quickly as possible. Yeah. And so that program will help you skip a few steps because you will be getting already designed for barricades that have been DOT approved, and we will make sure that your measurements are taken, accurately by professionals. Right.
Andrea, I had a question. Business owners are different than a restaurant business owners. They're asking if the city will explore the possibility to open streets for other type of businesses. Is that possible? Is that in consideration of the DOT?
Currently, it's being discussed. It's currently not possible. So, like non-restaurant businesses can't take over the curb lane or can't be out in the street at the moment. But it's under discussion, and there's a lot of moving parts to that discussion. But it's being contemplated.
And what type of businesses are you? What is the study at this moment? What type of businesses will fall into this group?
That's even more so part of what the discussion is what businesses would benefit and how much is the investment worth the return that they may or may not get. And so it varies. I mean, there's other sorts of food service establishments, those that are regulated by state agriculture department, that could maybe see some benefit. There may be the notion of salons and other places that are having difficult time because of distancing rules. But right now it's still a very broad conversation and really trying to figure out what the guidelines would be, and given those guidelines, would that be worth the investment for businesses to come out?
I just got a question on the chat here. Said, if I am a bar, can I partner with a restaurant next door to provide food?
I want to say that's possible because I want to say some bars, provided you have a health license and you're serving the food, if that's provided by some other kitchen, that's I guess that's your business, so to speak. But before you get it too far into that, if you were thinking about doing this, we should look more specifically and make sure that that's right. But I believe that is possible.
To a little follow up with that question. For bars, for example, can they say serve liquor and the businesses can have delivery from another restaurant? Like, so it would be bring your own food type of thing.
I don't think it can be delivered from another location so much as it has to be served by the bar itself. Okay. So in a sense where the bar is reselling somebody else's food, you actually get it served there because the bar has a health license to serve it to you. That would work. But if you're getting like the pizza store from down the street, you're just picking up and going to eat that pizza while you're at the bar, that wouldn't be compliant.
Okay. We tend to be very creative of how we can expand the rules, let's just call it that way. But it's a great clarification. It is something that I'm sure some businesses will try. And to me, as someone who work with small businesses all the time, I know that some of these rules seems cumbersome, but I think that it's important that we try to follow the rule as much as possible. I think right now it is a wonderful program. It is proving to be a lifeline for many restaurants. I like how lively the city is looking. I feel more comfortable walking later, in the evening, knowing that people are outside. But I think that we also need to be conscious that we're still in the middle of a pandemic, and that the only way that we are going to overcome this situation and get back to normal is by following the rules together.
Right.
So I think from patrons, neighbors, restaurants, I know that we all desperate to make an extra buck, but I think that if we take shortcuts right now, it means that we are going to go longer trying to survive this pandemic. So, just a little pitch from you to DOT, but also for me I consider myself a public servant, and also someone who's concerned about the survival of our neighbors and also the survival of our businesses. I think that let's just continue thinking that small sacrifices today means that the program, or the pandemic, hopefully will go away soon.
Faster.
Yeah, I think I'm very proud to be in New York City, in New York State, where we seem to be doing it right. We're looking at what other states are doing and the mistake. Let's not do that. So yeah. I really want to thank DOT for making this program, available. I know it requires a lot of work for your agency, a lot of headaches. We are using our streets in a way that we had never used before, at a scale that we never thought possible. So I really appreciate you guys have been wonderful, at least answering my questions, doing seminar for us. We did a seminar in Spanish. For those of you who want it in Spanish, we have the presentation. And if you look down in our page, you will find the presentation as well, the webinar in Spanish. So I just really want to reiterate how grateful I am for this program and how it's helping our businesses.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And thank you, Leslie. Our programs live and die by our community partners. And so we're always happy to partner with folks who are as dedicated to the community as you are. And I think to your point also, this program was born out of emergency need. The policy is by no means perfect, and it's sort of developing as we go. So working together with you guys and with the local businesses, as it becomes a more permanent thing, we'll be able to address a lot of the issues that are currently not the most ideal, but the best we can roll with given the circumstances.
Yeah. All right, Jacqueline, I'm not sure if you have another question or any last words. I just simply want to say for DOT, you guys have shown the professionalism. You guys have scale up, ramp up with no additional staffing. So big applaud and a big thank you for you and the entire agency. I think you guys are showing what's possible through public service during time of crisis. So thank you so much.
And thank you, Leslie, for sponsoring this event also, and working very close to the restaurants along 82nd Street partnership on 82nd Street in Jackson Heights. Also, Woodhaven Beat that is collaborating with these presentations, and more than happy to invite all to our programs at thequeenschamber.org. And thank you, DOT, and Andrew, Ronan, Greta, and Andrew also, RCC, for being here today.
Thank you.
I think with that, we conclude our program for today. For those of you who join us late, you can see the entire presentation at our website, at Queen's Chambers Facebook page, as well as the 82nd Street Partnership Facebook page. as well as in Instagram. So thank you so much for attending, to the chamber for coordinating this event, and for DOT to bringing us that wonderful information and answering all our questions. I'm sure we're going to have more soon.